allowed to make a big speech is beyond my comprehension. It's totally unrealistic, and this is probably an attempt to present the trial of James before the Sanhedrin, which we know occurred. So I think Sheps is right, and what the author here has done is actually compress two things. The attack on James and the trial of James into one episode, and putting it under the name of the Pauline archetypical convert Stephen, also the person beaten by Jewish crowds that we know, but not because he was a Christian, but because he was the emperor's messenger bringing treasure and other things. He may have been a secret Christian because he was coming from Corinth, where the emperor was holed up a lot of the time, and probably Corinth was a stronghold, as we know. That's why Paul's writing several letters to the Corinthians of Pauline ideology. So this guy might have been he may have been someone who was a Christian. And remember, I told you that several generations later, or at least one generation later, a man called Stephen is responsible for the assassination of Domitian, probably in return for Domitian's persecution of Christians, and Domitian's execution of Flavia Domitilla's husband or father, Flavius Clemens. And Flavius Clemens is, I think, our Clement, under whose name, as I told you, the Suit of Clementines is written. And the reason that he assassinates Domitian is because of all these Christians, including Domitilla, who one of the most important Christian catacombs in Rome is named after, because it was done on her property, in return for what Domitian did to people like that. And I think also, because Domitian executed Epaphroditus, who I told you about. I have a picture of Epaphroditus in my James book, and if you look in Josephus and elsewhere, you'll find out that Epaphroditus is Nero's secretary for Greek letters, and the person that Josephus dedicates all his works to. Epaphroditus, as I don't have the, here it is. Epaphroditus is also, as I told you, someone that Paul is very close to in Philippians, and someone that Paul says he sends to the imperial family or household as a messenger and so on. So I don't think that there would be two people called Epaphroditus in the imperial household at this time. Never mind. That's just my own point. But it could be his son that we're talking about, who may have had the same name. I don't know. But let's look at what happens with Stephen here. So now Stephen is before the Sanhedrin, and he gives a speech. Men, brothers, fathers, listen, the glory of God appeared to our father Abraham. Well, Abraham is not Stephen's father. He wouldn't be giving this speech, because Stephen is clearly a Gentile convert, an archetypical convert. He's not a native-born Jewish person. He's a Hellenist, at least. And what does a Hellenist mean? I have no idea. Anyway, he gives this long speech. Well, until you get to the error that he makes in this speech, you don't know where the speech may have come from. But the moment you come to the error, then you know where it came from. Errors often tell you where something comes from, just like I can tell you where the speech in... So we're beginning to unravel the working method of the author of Acts, I think. And I think I have done that in my work, probably one of the only ones to have ever done that in a fairly systematic way. I hope others may have been able to do it, but I think I have done it fairly well. And here we come to the error. Well, this is pretty straightforward history here until you get to line 16. And to know that this is an error, you have to know your biblical history. Now, most of you probably don't know your history well enough, and I'm sure your churches and other people you are familiar with don't know it well enough to have even bothered about this, so it wouldn't upset them. But I know Jews, and if you make a little error like this, they'll laugh you out of the room. They would start squawking and yelling. If I did this at a conference, I know I've done little mistakes of this kind occasionally, and I get totally butchered. So if you made this mistake in front of the Sanhedrin, you'd be gone. You'd be they'd be laughing and roaring and heaping abuse on you and so on. What's the mistake? Jacob went down to Egypt and died. And he and our fathers, this is a part of the, Joseph and Jacob and the forefathers and so on. And it's about Abraham's tomb at Machpelah, if you know where that is, in Hebron, where the tomb of the patriarchs is. There's a lot of material if you've read Genesis about that. How many are familiar with Abraham's tomb at Machpelah? It's in the book of Genesis. You'll have to read Genesis. It's not a big, long book. I mean, it's worthwhile reading if you're going to study this history of this period. And they were carried away to Shechem and were laid at the tomb which Abraham bought for a sum of money from the sons of Amor from Shechem. The only problem is that Abraham did not buy the tomb from the sons of Amor at Shechem. He bought the tomb from at Hebron at Machpelah, and that is where the ancestors died, but were buried. But that tells you immediately, if you go look this up in the Old Testament, where this notice is. It's in Joshua 24, the end of the book of Joshua. And then if you look carefully at what this speech is, it's Joshua's farewell speech to the Hebrew people at Shechem. And at the end of that, it talks about how he refers to the fact that Jacob was buried in the tomb, or is it Joseph? Who's got a Bible here? Let's get it. I usually have my own Bible with me, but I don't have it here. Who's got a Bible? Anyone here I can borrow? Let's look at it. Let's take a look. Let's see what. Let's be detectives. Okay, here we go. Joshua. Let me see. I usually have it marked so I can find it quickly. So Joshua 24, the very end of the book. Then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel together, and he started speaking to them. Thus saith the Lord God, your fathers, including Terah, the father of Abraham, the father of Nahab, dwelt on the other side of the river. Anyway, you can follow this whole speech so that he retraces the whole history of the Jewish people in chapter 24. And he traces the whole thing. And then at the end of this, line 32, after this whole speech is over, Joshua the son of Nun died, being 110 years old. They buried him in the border of Timnath-Serah and Ephraim. And Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua and all he had done from out. And the bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel had brought up out of Egypt with them, they buried in Shechem, in the plot of ground which Jacob had bought